This is Chris over at SkyTech Enterprise Solutions. And today we have a video on SQL Server. Um, Specifically, we'll be talking about SQL Server Management Studio and take a look at some of the capabilities of the software. We'll take a look at the interface and point out a few things that are worthy of note and serve as this video will serve as an introduction into the world of SQL Server. Let's get into it. So as you can see, I've opened a copy of this Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And this piece of software is a graphical user interface, right? It's a GUI, as most software are. It's a GUI interface as most software present themselves. And this is a tool or a piece of software that connects to a server, a SQL server located on this laptop, right? In a networked environment, this software could be installed on your laptop computer, and the server that you're connecting to might be, the SQL server might be located on a Windows server in another room, in your IT environment 2 blocks away, or in a totally different city, right? So this is a very powerful piece of software. All right, as you can see here, I have connected to my my native or local SQL server, and I have some database. I have some objects in here that we're going to go through shortly. This is a typical SQL Server install. I haven't really customized too much of anything in here, right? So what you're seeing is your typical SQL Server installation right after you download it from the Microsoft website. Double-click the installer file and complete the installation. So let's take a look at what we have here. Of course, we have our database folder. We have our security folder, server objects, replication, polybase, always on high availability folder, management folder, integration services catalogs folder. We have this item here, which is a SQL Server agent, and we have our X event profiler. Okay. This first icon here that you're seeing is the database. It looks like a drum. And as you can see, it has this green, this round green icon next to it. If you enlarge it, it actually looks like a play icon, right? So that tells you that the server is connected. You can disconnect it as well. All right. And then you can start it. You can connect back to it after you disconnect it. We'll go into this databases folder. Once you click on this plus sign to display all these items, what you notice is you see another folder here called a system database or system databases. And then you have your database snapshots. Now, these, we'll get into it in a few moments. This AdventureWorks Data Warehouse 2019 database, I actually downloaded from Microsoft online and imported it into this, or attached it to this SQL server that I have, right? So these do not come with your basic install. And I know I did mention that I haven't done too much customizations, but yeah, these two customizations I've done, and these two others databases that I created. And yes, this is not too much customizations because SQL Server is capable of a lot more. All right. Okay. Let's get into what a database structure looks like. Well, actually, before we even get into that, let's go to the security folder. So again, system databases, database snapshots, and databases that you import into your environment or attach or create. Okay. The next folder here says security, and this is technically the accounts of all the users on this server. Okay, so these could be service accounts, individual database administrator accounts. It could be Windows Server accounts that maintain and manage the services on the server. It could be your ASP.NET developer. It could be other applications that are installed on your environment that also use the SQL Server as a backend database. All right. This folder talks about server roles, and basically what's going on here is that these are the roles that out of the box that come with or ship with SQL Server. So if you add a new user, they fall into one of these roles. If you have a new system, they can be added to one of these roles. And as you can see, we have DB creator, database creator, bulk admin, right? These roles have specific users. You have the public. So let's say you have a website that pulls data from this database server here. You can have that website run under a public account, right? So you create an account in here, and you basically add that account, not in here specifically, you create a login here, and during the creation process, you give that account a server role. All right. Some of these roles have higher permissions, setup admin, just as the name says, when you're setting up SQL, you're pretty much the owner of the application at that point, right? So you do fall into here. One account can have multiple roles, okay, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Next folder here, we have credentials. Looks like there's nothing in here. Okay, so we'll skip that. Here we have cryptographic providers. This is a whole nother topic here. Cryptography deals with some cybersecurity concepts, but we're not copying, we're not discussing those concepts in this video, so we'll skip that folder as well. Audits, same deal. That's another advanced concept in SQL Server Management, where you actually come in and you audit log files or records or operations within SQL Server. Okay, same goes for here, server audit specs. We're not dealing with that. Server objects. This folder is very key in managing SQL Server, right? If you have multiple backup devices, let's say I have, I save my log files to my D drive on this computer, or my E drive, or my X drive, and then I also save some of my log files on a server somewhere within our environment, right? That's when you, sorry, I meant to say if you're backing up data, so your SQL Server data files, if you're backing them to your local computer or your local server, or to a server in a network location or a network drive somewhere, another location, as long as you can get to it, you can add it here as a backup device, right? You can also provision a new backup device. All right. Here you have system endpoints. All right, and here, so this folder presents another level of complexity with SQL Server. Database mirroring, you might have an instance or a situation where you want to have identical instances of your server or your database running in multiple locations. There's so many ways of configuring SQL Server. You can use this folder to actually manage your mirrored databases. Service broker, that's another advanced concept. Same goes for SOAP. T-SQL, that's the language for writing SQL queries. It's called Transact SQL. And the reason why it's distinct is because Oracle has its own SQL language. MySQL also has its own SQL language. So T-SQL makes it more distinct for SQL Server Microsoft. Linked servers, this refers to having a server, and it doesn't have to be a server. It could be a flat file. As you see, you can actually have a spreadsheet sitting somewhere on a network folder. You have some HR workers actually doing data entry into that spreadsheet, and then that spreadsheet connected into SQL here and actually updating the database on SQL Server as well. Okay, and you can tell what's going on here with these kind of providers, right? So these are Microsoft's way of saying, if you have a spreadsheet or if you have an Access database or if you have a CSV file, we want to be able to connect to, or maybe it could be another SQL Server somewhere, right? And sometimes even SQL's Oracle Server or different types of servers, database servers can be linked to SQL somehow, right? It takes some configuration to do, but it's possible. Here you have a folder called triggers, and triggers are basically pieces of code that you write and they get triggered on conditions, right? So the concept is just that simple. When something happens, run code. Replication is a form of creating exact copies of a database, right? And so you can replicate a database and publish it, right? And that's called a local publication here. It could be remote, or you can also replicate a database and have, so hold on, let me start over. So you yourself can replicate a database and save it locally, right? And you can also you can subscribe to someone else's database, right? And when you do that, your connections actually live in these folders and you can manage that from here. All right, we will skip Polybase. Always on high availability is also a very advanced feature of SQL Server. Basically, what this is providing additional continual uptime and availability for SQL Server databases. There's some configuration here to do, but that's not the focus of our video today. And again, just to go back to this replication here, the whole point of having replication of data is to, provide more database integrity, right? You want to have a disaster recovery plan to be very resilient in terms of catastrophic events happening. Could be power outages, could be malicious code coming in and ruining your database. But oh, by the way, you do have copies elsewhere, and they may not be affected yet, right? So you can always backtrack and recover some data. Another very advanced aspect of SQL Server. Okay. Management. This folder basically shows you that you can have policies in terms of your SQL Server management, because SQL Server is not only a database full of data, the server itself also needs management, right? And you have to have policies in terms of the system itself, the databases that come onto it, et cetera, et cetera. So these are very advanced concepts of SQL Server management, but it's good that you know, right? You know what happens when you become a SQL Server DBA. I know they still get paid a lot of money, so this will be your best friend right here. All right, we're going to skip these folders over here down to maintenance plans. And again, going back to what we just mentioned, this is the management folder, so it makes sense that you have a maintenance plan here, to manage or maintain SQL Server. So we'll call this maintenance plan -1, and it runs under my SQL Server agent service account. and we will say check database integrity. And this is just an example, right? We'll select which database, and we'll go with English words, and we'll say include indexes, physical only. All right, and next. And this is the location where it's supposed to be provided at. We don't want to send an email, and finish. Right. So now while SQL Server is running, we'll just go ahead and try to browse to this folder. Let's see here. All right, so that's not working. Anyway, so now you can see the maintenance plan has been created successfully. So now if you go back to the folder, you'll see that there's a maintenance plan -1 right here. All right. And I know I haven't gone through all the items here, which I will, so don't worry about it. We have SQL Server log files, and as you remember in one of my Splunk videos, I did go to a SQL Server log and import it into Splunk. So again, this is how you find your SQL Server logs, right? They are here. You can export it. So you can export this as SQL, give it a unique name. You can export these files. Okay, they're very, very useful. All right. You can have SQL Server send email based on triggers that happen right here. So if the server errors out, throws an error, a specific error, you can have it send you email, etc., etc., etc. All right. And we come down to the SQL Server agent is a very, very, it's just like Santa's little helper, right? The SQL Server agent executes jobs, alerts, operators, proxies, error logs. A lot of activity that happens in SQL Server is ran by the SQL Server agent. And I think you did notice that this this maintenance plan is being run under the SQL Server agent service account, right? So, I mean, SQL Server agent is amazing. Again, you can stop it, you can start it, okay? But I'd rather keep it on if you have a working environment going on. All right, so that is our intro into the SQL Server, at least this this left-hand side tree view, okay? Now, also, as you can notice, SQL Server has, just like most Microsoft software, has a menu out here. Some people call it a ribbon. And it has this usual file, edit, view menu items here. So file technically gives you the ability to create a new file, a new project, okay? You can do additional things. You know, you can query with your current connection, all right? So for instance, I could go in here. Actually, let's go to AdventureWorks, find me a table, and go to an exciting table, and we'll say select top 1,000 rows. And as you can see, we get all this information here from this table called customer address. Okay, so this icon here is for database. That's the drum icon. And then the tables within the database has this kind of a grid looking icon. And then, so, you know, every time you see a plus sign, you can actually click on the plus sign to reveal what's beneath it, right? So even the tables themselves have columns, keys, right? Unique keys, primary keys, that sort of thing. It has constraints, it has triggers. You can put an index onto a table, right? So you can put an index on the primary key. And then SQL Server also gathers statistics about the table and its operation and stuff like that, right? So your top level item is the database, and then within the database you have tables. So you can have multiple tables within one database. And then you can have multiple databases within one SQL Server installation. All right. So here you can, again, like I said, you can click on a new, create new project, new file. You can open an existing file, right? Which means that if you've written this code and saved it somewhere, you can actually go back and open that file using this menu. You can add a new project to an existing project. You can close a whole solution. You can save this SQL Server query, right? So we can save that, call it SQL Query 4000. You can save it somewhere, as I mentioned. There's so much you can do with this. You can print code. You can go to your recent files, recent projects, etc. Now let's go to the edit menu item. So here you can go to align. Okay. Oops, I think it's still running. Just give it a second or two. Right, as you can see, it says go to line number 1 to 7. I mean, yeah, go to line number 1 to 7, but go to number 7. We have only one line here. Okay, so it's really not making sense. Now, if we go over to, I think that was it. All right, so now let's see if we can do a go to line 2. Yep, see, that's line 2, and this is line 1, right? So there's so much you can do to your scripts using this edit. You can do a find and replace. So you can do a quick find, just like you do in Microsoft Word. You can go and type in name, and it selects name for you. You can go in here and type date, right? This is where I'm searching, and you see that it's picking up what I'm searching really quickly. There's so much you can do. You can have IntelliSense, and guys, IntelliSense is that thing where when you start typing, right? When you start typing, see, it pops up. The software actually tries to guess what you're looking for. It's sort of like in Google when you're doing a search and it says it tries to offer you suggestions, right? Is this what you were looking for? So yep. Now I can go in and click yes, this is what I was looking for. It basically allows you to have the right syntax, right? So it's very good to use IntelliSense as a developer. All right. So yeah, you can explore these items and just try to get into it. You don't really need it all the time, but these are really important as you configure your SQL Server Management Studio interface. This option here, view, also has some cool things going for it. Your toolbars can be edited. Okay. So much you can do to it. As you can see, these guys are appearing as I add options here. So if you pay attention to the ribbon, you'll see that when I click, things appear here, right? It may not be very evident, but when it's time to use these things, you want to make sure that you have all the ribbon items that you need. Okay. Here you can go and do a new query. You can execute a query like I did. Of course, let me get rid of this guy here. Okay, you can execute a query. You can parse a query. Parsing a query simply means that, so for instance, I can go here and I can parse it, right? It's checking to see if there's anything wrong with this code. Of course, if I parse this, see, I get an incorrect error message here that says, hey, there's something wrong with your code, and the incorrect syntax is near the word from, which is this guy right here. Okay, so a lot of times when you write code, it's good to parse it before you run it or execute it. it kind of helps. It saves you from wasting your time looking at error and then, pulling out your hair. Come to find out, all you have to do was select everything. Now, um, if you notice that up here, this text is in green, right? This is code. This is a comment. All right. And for those new to development in general, when you're writing code, for the sake of yourself and the sake of your teammates, you want to have as much documentation as possible, right? So you can come in here, write another piece of code, document it, right? Or, well, comment, actually, I'm sorry. Comment it, so that as you're going down the road, you're like, okay, well, this is, Highway 95. Over here, when you go, you need to go 75 miles an hour, right? And this is the code. When you get to this point, you're like, okay, well, you need to make a left on this here. So here, you're leaving guidelines, right? This piece of code was a function. So here you can say function to return current user name and address, right? And then you go ahead and write your code here, right? Insert code. See? And then you go here, you have another comment, right? This is a comment. So how do you write a comment? Very simple. All you do is you put, I think this one does it. This is also a comment. Nice. Oops. The other menu item I want to look at, gosh, I got to keep these videos short, is a SQL Server Profiler, Database Engine Tuning Advisor, Azure Data Studio, migrate to Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud environment, Code Snippets Manager, right? So Code Snippets Manager basically keeps a bunch of code within SQL itself for use, right? So, and these are handy code. It's not really complex things. It's just stuff to kind of help you figure some issues out. Okay. So as you can see here, this one creates a table, etc., etc. All right. You can customize things in here. So compare files and pay attention to this top right corner. When I click on this, you get to see things show up here like that, right? So if I click on that, something disappears. If I click on this, something appears, right? So you get all these features and functions that come with Management Studio, and it's all to help you write better code, manage your databases better, and be successful in your job. But you have to get a good idea of what this tool does. You have to have a great idea of what this tool does, okay? And it's a great idea to just really sit down and understand what this tool can do, okay? So it doesn't hurt to really click around, get some test data that's not really that important, and then you play with it and figure out what's going on. Like, what does this drop down do, right? And you notice that if I ran this code, oops, let's see here, execute. Yeah, go like that. Let's go like this. Commands. Let's do it. Call it test. That's a report file. See, I just got an estimate of the query, how long it takes, and all this data here. So SQL has a lot of features going for it. So if you're serious about SQL, I think you should really get into it and really get to know what this software does, right? All right, guys, that is it for now. This is our first video. I'll be working on a second video where we'll have some SQL commands for you to look at. We'll be creating, we'll actually be, we'll be creating databases. We'll be creating indexes. We will also create views on our tables. We will run select queries to select, data from these databases and tables. We would create a store procedure as well. So stay tuned for the next video, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.